Welcome on in, potential Warhammer action figure aficionados. This is Sprues and Studs, and for some odd reason, you have found this channel. I feel sorry for you because I am going to make you bleed some money now. So this video is going to be for the newcomers in the Warhammer 40K action figure world. You know, the scouts, the initiates, the acolytes. It is not going to be for you seasoned Vanguard veterans, Stern Guard, and First Company veterans of this channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the three main action figure companies, how much these action figures generally cost, what do they look like, and what should you expect from them. And without further ado, let's start off with the first one, which is McFarlane. So in general, what are you getting when you're getting into the McFarlane action figure line? Well, to be honest, you are going to get some cheap, decent figures. They are on a larger scale. They're usually around 7 inches tall, and you can definitely see these figures well if you're displaying them in your display cabinet or you just walk in. They are definitely the largest action figures that are currently made to date. The articulation is generally pretty good on these action figures, although there are some exceptions, especially on the bigger figures, in which there are some issues of articulation in terms of limitation of motion. As you can see, there's some good detail on the armor. There's battle damage in terms of various dents and scrapes that McFarlane has introduced into their action figures. The cloth on the loincloth, for example, has texture. The paint quality is actually what I tend to focus on, and I would have to say they are generally quite subpar. Would probably equate the painting to perhaps beginner level quality. As you can see, there is definite base coat on these action figures, but they lack highlights as well as shading to actually give the figure oomph to go to the next level. The painting on the weapons are generally pretty simple as well, with typically only 2 colors. Sometimes you actually only get 1 color, which is a shame. And most of the time, the melee weapons that you get, such as the chainsaws as well as the power axe, will have like some kind of bent curvature. This is just part of the manufacturing, that you're gonna have to take those weapons and then dip them into some sort of hot water and slowly bend them back into shape. The reason why I say this is entry level, because, well, they tend to be on the cheaper side. McFarlane action figures now are around $30, but they used to be actually $20, which really made them worth it. Now, the big boy action figures used to be $40, but again, with inflation, price has increased to $50. For example, in the very recently released Ultramarines Terminator. McFarlane, as a toy figure company, have been making action figures, I feel like, since the dawn of time. So they are very popular and very well known in terms of the action figure line. They started making these Warhammer 40K action figures back in 2022. So they've been around the business for about 4 years in terms of making these kinds of action figures, starting off with this Ultramarine, to be honest. They have kind of a small to medium-ish range of action figures. They have Loyalist Marines, they have some Chaos Marines, and a few Imperial Guard or Astra Militarum. The Xenos includes a few smattering of Orcs, Necrons, as well as Tyranids. But I'll say, in general, the range is very limited. Now, they also have a whole entire different line of action figures called artist-proof action figures, and they are completely gray and unadorned, and basically they are waiting for your painter's brush to be put on them to bring to life. So that actually may be something that you painting experts would want to do. The next company I'm going to be talking about is JoyToy, which by far is the bread and butter of this channel that you're on right now. And I'll be honest with you, probably the most popular action figure maker for Warhammer 40K. In general, they tend to be a little bit more on the pricey side, but they are generally fairly well made, and I will say that in an asterisk form, which I will describe to you a little bit later. So these action figures are generally on the 1 to 1/18th scale. So these figures right now are roughly about 5 inches tall. The Space Marine is around 5 inches, whereas this Sister of Battle action figure is around 4 inches. The articulation on these action figures are very good, and they are fairly posable generally. There are some instances in which the cape as well as the armor will block some sort of motion on these action figures. The armors tend to be kind of weathered looking, but they lack the battle damage that you would see in a McFarlane action figure. And if the action figure is rocking some cloth in the form of cape, there's some beautiful highlights as well as shading that's going on, and the fur, like a Space Wolves action figure, has a ton of texture. The painting in general is better than McFarlane by far. I would say that if you're looking at these action figures in terms of a painter's skill level, I would say that the painting quality is intermediate level. On all of these action figures, you have a fairly decent base coat, but they also have a decent amount of highlighting and shading on the armors, as well as the melee weapons and the bolt guns. But you must be aware that these action figures are mass manufactured, so you're going to be seeing some paint quality issues where it kind of looks like the highlighting was drawn by a child, and there's some instances in which you may get some wrong fitting parts as well, so that's something to keep in mind. So the reason why I say that these action figures are on an intermediate level is because of their price point. So this basic intercessor right here that you see starts off at $35, which is a little bit expensive, but not too bad. But once you start getting to the character range, you're going to start seeing some prices around the $60 and $70 line. And then most special characters come in at $70 and $80. The thing about JoyToy is that they have bikes that come in at around $35, dreadnoughts that can be around $100, and the Dread Knight, which is the most expensive action figure at the top of the range, weighs in at around like, what, $350 to $400, which is not cheap. JoyToy is mostly known for their mechs and their real-world interpretations of soldiers before they were contacted by GW to make these action figures here, so they definitely do know what they're doing. In terms of the range of JoyToy action figures, they are absolutely massive in terms of the Loyalist action figures. They have a large range of Space Marines, including Blood Angels, Ultramarines, Black Templars, as well as Grey Knights. They also have plenty of Adeptus Custodes, Sisters of Battle, as well as the Imperial Guard. As stated, they have a ton of characters such as captains, librarians, as well as chaplains. But what makes them really unique is, well, the introduction of special characters such as Mephiston, Ragnar Blackmane, as well as the 2 Warhammer 40K Primarchs such as Mr. Robo, as well as Mr. Lion. There's also a smattering of Chaos Space Marines, Tau Orcs, and now a very newly introduced line of Tyranids. So you are actually seeing this video in a very interesting time because guess what? They have just introduced the Horus Heresy line of action figures to further bleed your money from your pockets. So they started off with the Imperial Fists, with the introduction of Rogel Dorn, and then they will be releasing the Horus Ascended Primarch action figure for the Sons of Horus, which is going to be pretty awesome. Before we talk about the third action figure manufacturers, please allow me to interrupt my past self by letting you know that I have partnered up with David Toys. They were originally known as Flimatoy to bring you your action figure needs. They have fantastic customer service, and they also have free shipping, with these action figures shipped to your doorstep in roughly about 10 to 14 days, which is not that bad from overseas. And then they actually have a very large catalog of these Warhammer 40K action figures for your collecting needs. And before you check out, do not forget to use the code SNS to receive 12% off your purchase, because we all know these action figures are quite expensive and you want to keep your money in your pockets. So with that being said, let's now talk about the third action figure manufacturer. And the third and final company that makes Warhammer 40K action figures is Bandai Namco. These action figures tend to be a more expensive fare. They are just about as tall as a McFarlane action figure, standing in about roughly 7 inches. The articulation and joints on these action figures tend to be quite buttery smooth in terms of McFarlane as well as JoyToy. Now, these armors tend to be fairly clean looking and very freshly minted, so there's absolutely no damage whatsoever. So I suppose one complaint that people have is that these action figures tend to be a little bit too clean looking. However, there is plenty of detail on this armor. What I mean by that is that the paint quality tends to actually be one of the best on these action figures. I believe that Bandai Namco probably tends to pay attention to the details compared to the other two manufacturers that I highlighted in this video. The weapons are also extremely detailed, as you can see over here, as well as on this chainsword. There is also plenty of highlighting and shading on these action figures. So again, if you're going to equate the paint quality to a painter in real life, I would have to say it looks pretty intermediate. So another main complaint that people have said to me on this channel was that these action figures tend to be a little bit anime looking, and I would have to generally agree with that, especially around the lens and the helmet area. But I'll have to say the main detraction is that these tend to be quite expensive for a grunt level intercessor. So your basic intercessor used to cost $100, and now it has been inflated up to $110. Whereas the most expensive figure is the one right here, which is the Gravis Captain, that literally weighs in at $250, which is obviously not cheap. Their line is extremely limited. In fact, they have the smallest line out of all three of the action figure makers. They have a smattering of Loyalist intercessors, such as this Blood Angel over here. They also have some White Scars, some Ultramarines, and this one singular Gravis Captain. So Bandai Namco is a very reputable company. They are actually also known for their high level of detail on their action figures. That is my fairly quick rundown of all three action figure companies. My recommendation in general is to start off with the McFarlane action figures, and if you find out that you're wanting more, as in like more depth of detail, painting, more variety of action figures, then I highly suggest you go into the JoyToy line. And if you're wanting some direction on which JoyToy Loyalist action figures to buy, I will go over a revised list of the top 10 infantry Space Marine action figures that you should get in an upcoming video. So I thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this video is going to help you start off bleeding more money into the Warhammer 40K line. And with that being said, I'll see you all in the next one.